Jivitaṃ byādhi kālo ca Dehanikkhepanaṃ gati Pañc jīvalokasmiṃ Animittā nāyare. Length of life on that set of sickness, the time of our death, where our body will be laid to rest, and the afterlife destination. There is no harbinger in this world to tell these 5 things in advance. I'd like to start by paying homage to the Lord Buddha, offering salutation to Phra Nicholas, to senior and junior monks respectively, greetings to all the lay supporters and distinguished guests who have joined this final day of 7 days of funeral chanting, especially all the temple supporters who knew Mr. Thavorn Phromthavorn personally before his passing on October the 12th, 2023 at the age of 74. Today is October the 20th, 2023, and my name is Phra Nicholas Thanissaro of Dhammakaya International Meditation Center in Azusa. Today I'd like to share a short Dhamma talk on the topic of a savvy attitude to mourning our dearly departed, for the benefit of those joining this memorial dedication in person or online. Grief after the death of a loved one can drain you and keep you reeling, no matter what sort of relationship you had with them. Received wisdom from the healthcare professionals acknowledge that grief can have a serious effect on the people who are bereaved. Those who don't understand your grief may expect you to get over it within 3 days, but those who are more understanding may acknowledge the sense of a loved one may never actually go away. It leaves a hole in your life, but it's one that you gradually learn to live with. Modern day advice on bereavement usually includes 10 suggestions, namely learning to validate rather than deny your feelings, fully experiencing the grief, caring for yourself, sharing good memories of your loved one, honoring their memory, forgiving them, accepting help from others when necessary, embracing family, and within our Dhamma community or Sangha, our funeral ceremonies are intended to be a way to share and celebrate the lives of congregation members we have lost. The Buddhist funeral goes a long way toward fulfilling the advice of sharing memories, honoring loved one's memory, and finding forgiveness. The idea is to turn around a tragic life event into a sense of urgency to cultivate ever-increasing good deeds of our own during the time still available to us. And to this end, the tradition is to share a short, relevant story from the Buddhist scriptures, and the story I've chosen today conveys a message about how to be savvy in the way we mourn our dearly departed. The Buddhist proverb I started by quoting today is actually from the Visuddhimagga, and it is illustrated by a teaching sometimes known as the savvy mourner proverb, given by the Buddha about a layman called Sujata, both in the Petawattu and in the Sujata Jataka. It tells a story of a rather unorthodox, skillful means used by the Bodhisattva to overcome the grief and sorrow of losing a close relative. And although my intention is not to belittle the grief of anyone still experiencing sadness in the audience today, the message from the Dhamma story is a valuable one for all of us. There was a time when the Buddha was staying at Savatthi, and he consoled a grieving man who had lost his father with the words, "Are you grieving your father from the present life, or are you grieving for the times you have lost him in the distant past?" Because it turned out it was not the first lifetime the Buddha had helped this man to overcome his grief. In the former lifetime, long ago in Benares, the same man had been born as the father of the Buddha-to-be, or the Bodhisattva, who was a young, intelligent man called Sujata. Now in that family it was the grandfather who had died. The father, the son of the deceased, was overcome by grief and lamentation. and with a tearful face he wailed and beat his breast as he circumambulated his grandfather's funeral pyre by the right. Meanwhile, Sujata, the grandson of the deceased, searched for some means of removing his father's grief until he came up with a plan. One day he saw the carcass of a dead ox outside the city. He brought some food and water and placed them in front of it, and giving it a mouthful, stood there talking to it as though it were still alive, saying, "Eat, eat, drink, drink." And when the passers-by saw this, they asked, "Sujata, are you completely out of your mind, trying to offer grass and water to a dead ox?" But he said nothing in reply. The passers-by were worried, and they went to his father, saying, "Your son has gone crazy, and he is trying to give grass and water to a dead ox." When he heard this, Sujata's father forgot his own grief, and agitated at the thought that his son had gone mad. He hurried to where his son was and reprimanded him, saying, "Sujata, aren't you supposed to be wise, clever, and full of intelligence? Why are you giving grass and water to a dead ox?" The son replied, "Father, just as it is crazy for me to talk to a dead ox, bring it food and drink, it is no more sensible for you to burn yourself out grieving over your own father. No amount of grief will restore him to life." At these words, the father realized the son's ruse and exclaimed, "Truly, the dart of grief that formerly pierced my heart has been drawn out. You have dispelled the grief for my father which had overwhelmed me. With that dart withdrawn, I am tranquil and restored. I will no longer grieve or weep." It turned out that just as Sujata had distracted his father from his grief in that lifetime, similarly wise people channel their pity into more useful ends, such as the dedication of merit at a funeral for those they have lost. And this thought brings me back to the Buddhist proverb from the Visuddhimagga, which I started with, the discourse that Jivitaṃ, byādhi, kālo ca, Dehanikkhepanaṃ gati, Pañc jīvalokasmiṃ, Animittā nāyare, length of life, onset of sickness, the time of our death, where our body will be laid to rest, and the afterlife destination. There is no harbinger in this world to foretell these 5 things. So there are 3 messages from this teaching that can be drawn from today's proverb. Firstly, death is unpredictable because we don't know when it is going to strike us. We don't know whether the death that is constantly stalking us will come to us in the morning, at noon, or in the night. Knowing this, we should never be reckless in our life, thinking that time is on our side. So we have no time to waste. We need to establish ourselves in good deeds, whatever our age, striving to conduct ourselves in body, speech, and mind in a way that is upstanding and exemplary. Secondly, all of us must one day be separated from our loved ones and treasured things. We must all meet up with suffering at some point. The more we love something, the more pain we feel when we are letting go. Therefore, when we love something, we should treat that thing like it is something on loan, in order that the loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity we have does not become clingy. So that was the second point. Thirdly, we must try to perceive the world as it really is. The organization of a funeral for a loved one, dedicating merit for a loved one who has passed away by hosting a ceremony for chanting the Abhidhamma, is a way for friends and fellow Sangha members who outlive the deceased to celebrate their life. It's a chance for all of us to be able to recollect and reflect on all the goodness of exemplary people in our life. And something that we learn from this is that there is no one without exception who can escape death. Everything in this world, whether it's animate or inanimate, is impermanent and changes the whole of the time. It changes in the direction of disintegration and decay. We should remind ourselves habitually of these things so that we are not reckless in our lives. We cannot afford to be distracted and oblivious in our lives. Some people just spend their times entertaining themselves without bothering to cultivate any understanding of the nature of life. But all of us have to die someday. We have no way of knowing in advance when it's going to be or where it's going to happen. So we must work out our true purpose in life as soon as we can, so we can fulfill our destiny before it's too late, so we can have a future that is free from suffering and filled with happiness and purity. If we reflect objectively on our lives, we might realize the degree of suffering in our lives from the past down to the present day, and all the things that we now regret. We may have experienced pain and suffering from illness, sometimes from bad choices, sometimes from conditions beyond our control. But if we are able to accept these things, then it will allow us to let go of those attachments to the things that caused the suffering in the first place, so that we can minimize entanglements, so that we can let our mind go inwards towards the things that are the real happiness. Seeing the world in this way, we can expend effort and energy in finding a way to break free of the cycle of existence by attaining the triple gem within ourselves as a refuge. And this we can achieve by conducting ourselves in a non-reckless way every minute of the day, since there's never a day when we can be certain it might not be our last. We might be okay today, but we don't know what we're going to meet up with tomorrow. Therefore, we have to make today count towards our goodness, for example, by having mindfulness that is established in our own body, by using our wisdom to reflect on the nature of our life. Imina kata punyena, through the power of the merits arising from the Dhamma talk today, may these merits bring Mr. Thavorn Phromthavorn happiness and prosperity in his new rebirth, according to the wishes of the supporters on this occasion. And may these merits bring all the supporters long life, strong health, strength, happiness, and quick-wittedness. Whatever good things you wish for in life, may those things come to you easily in every way. So instead of mourning Mr. Thavorn Phromthavorn, as I've heard many exclamations of disbelief and denial over the last few days, we should bear in mind that Mr. Thavorn has cultivated good deeds relentlessly throughout his life. He was the first person to be accepted as a resident layman at Visuddhimagga in Thailand back in 1976. He was a faithful personal attendant of the Visuddhimagga, the president of the Dhammakaya Foundation since their time at Dhammaprasit House in Wat Pak Nam, Pasir Charan. It was also owing to his courage and insight that our temple was able to find the land to build many of the retreat centers in remote areas of Thailand. Mr. Thavorn was also a gifted meditator and uses his subtle powers to liaise on behalf of the temple with many masters of meditation and also Buddhist hermits that I mentioned in the previous talks this week. He is best known for being the official Buddha statue sculptor for our temple, and as we know, it is necessary to see the body of enlightenment clearly inside yourself before you can make an accurate Buddha image from first-hand experience. Mr. Thavorn's masterpiece was a 15-foot-tall silver Buddha statue at the center of the Dhammakaya Jettiya in Thailand. So we're all familiar with his work because he created all the mastercasts for the Buddha statues that we use in our temple branches throughout the world. And as we heard from the MC's eulogy, towards the end of his life, he was always the representative of the Visuddhimagga for offering robes, and sometimes katina robes, to more than 50,000 temples across Thailand on behalf of Visuddhimagga, and also he was sent to renovate many of the Burmese temples and Buddha statues as well on behalf of our main teacher. So it's expected that from all the good deeds that Mr. Thavorn Phromthavorn cultivated throughout his lifetime, together with the merit from the funeral ceremonies organized in his name today and over the last 7 days, especially the merit from today's Dhamma talk on the Savi mourning for our dearly departed, as Mr. Thavorn Phromthavorn looks down on us from his new existence, he will be led to an ever brighter and more refined status in his afterlife. So now, before we hear the funeral chanting, I'd like to invite everyone to call to mind all the merits arising as we reflect in silence for a few moments on the merit of cultivating faith, precepts, generosity, wisdom in our lives, reflecting on the true nature of life, reflecting on the goodness of Mr. Thavorn Phromthavorn, for his happiness, for our happiness now and in the hereafter, for a few moments in silence. We bring our mind back to the center of our body, lightly and gently, bringing to mind the brightness, purity, thinking of the Buddha's statues, which Mr. Thavorn, he brought into the world for us to see, imagining those Buddha statues at the center of our body, perhaps in gold, crystal, maybe a whole stream of Buddha images inside, as we dedicate merit for him and make a wish for ourselves or others that we can meet again as we continue to cultivate perfections as we reach towards the utmost Dharma.